single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her. And her mother?
Free 866-341-1425.
Hola Florida, introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light Beers. Enjoy responsibly.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her. And her mother? Her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Esto es amor de verdad, nadie lo puede dudar.
Step up to craft beer. Taino Light Lager has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean-style flavor. Boricua Beer Craft Ale, full-body flavor for the true beer drinker. Stop drinking beer water. Taino Craft Light Lager and Boricua Strong Craft Ale. Feel the rhythm. Step
Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high quality craft beer, 2 high quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedano's, we're in Bravo's, 7-Elevens are picking it up because they're concentrating more on craft beer and the Hispanic market. So what we're trying to do is do a quality beer, a high quality beer, more taste, and that the Hispanic community will like.
Good evening. My name is Mitchell Bloomer, and I'm the teacher here at the Holocaust Memorial Resource and Education Center of Florida. Our Holocaust Center and Museum was created back in 1981 by Tess Wise and other local Holocaust survivors to tell their story to their neighbors and friends who live here in Central Florida. Tess and other local survivors moved here in the years after they survived the Holocaust, and in their early years in the United States, they were dedicated to trying to rebuild their lives. So here they finished their education, they got married, started businesses, raised families, and lived their lives as American citizens. But as they began to reach their retirement years, they began to think about their legacy and the fact that many people might not know what happened in the time of the Holocaust unless they told the stories. So they created this Holocaust Center. Now, their message essentially was, here we are, we're your neighbors, we're your friends, we've shared lives together here, but now let us tell you what happened to us when we were kids, when we lived in Nazi-occupied Europe. And that's what was the beginning idea behind this Holocaust Center. Now, we tell the story of what happened to Jewish people in Europe during the time of the Holocaust using photographs, artifacts, interview clips, and authentic information and archival records, all put together in a narrative format so that people who come in from the public can encounter this as a story. Now, the story actually begins today, where the local Holocaust survivors said, this is what our lives are like now. We just participate in society in every way that people do. But you can see even in the modern world, the danger of what happened in the time of the Holocaust has not entirely disappeared. For example, we have a photo of 9/11 because we want to show that there are still people in the world today who would use political violence to achieve their goals. But not just any old goals. There are also neo-Nazis in America. These men here who were portraying the swastika in a public rally were not doing so in Germany in the 1930s or 40s, but in the United States in the 1980s. And in this photograph here, this NSPA that you can see above the standard stands for National Socialist Party of America. Of course, somebody doesn't have to go by the name Nazi in order to be espousing the same ideas. This gentleman who wrote a letter to our center wrote on the behalf of an organization that we've all heard of, the Ku Klux Klan. And in the letter, he makes it very clear that he does not consider himself to be a Nazi. But then everything else he says in the letter goes to show that he was very much in agreement with their particular interpretation of racism and who belongs in society and who should be excluded. So the danger of the Holocaust has not disappeared simply because the original Nazis have receded into history. Now, of course, the Jewish people who were picked on by the Nazis were simply neighbors and friends who lived in places where they wanted to live normal lives. So the very first teaching goal that we have at the Holocaust Center is to show that these people were not that different from their neighbors. So for example, we show some photographs here that document Jewish life in Germany and in Europe prior to the time of the Holocaust. So here you have a German Jewish family, the Wallach family of Munich. The father had been a veteran of the First World War. His family was thoroughly German. There they are dressed in lederhosen, for example. And in fact, they could trace their ancestry in Germany back into the 1400s. Nevertheless, the Nazis said that they did not belong simply because they were Jewish. Now, here you see in Poland a street of businesses where some of the people on that street are Jewish and some of them are not. Some of them are business owners, some of them are employees, some of them are customers. But all of them are engaged in the normal activities of commerce, just like you and I would be if we went out to the local mall. And even if you look at them, you can see some of the Jewish people in this picture are dressed in Orthodox Hasidic garb, but others are dressed in fashions that would not even look that strange to us today. A young man in a shirt and a tie. A lady in a nice dress with some pearls. Not at all something that would seem out of place even in 2018. Now here you have a group of Jewish people engaged in a community play. Here you have a group of Jewish people in a religious service. And many people would say, okay, well, yes, I know that's then how Jews are different. They have a different religion than most other people. But the fact is that Jewish people encounter their own religion the same way most other people encounter their own. And so you have some Jewish people who are deeply committed to their religious identity, others who maybe see it as one part of many aspects of their life. Just like with Christians, just like with Muslims, just like with any other religious group. One thing, however, that does set maybe these people apart from some others, it can be seen in this photograph right here. This was a photograph of some Jewish people who had experienced in the generation prior to the Holocaust a Russian pogrom, an attack against Jews in the Russian Empire. And so there you have a prior history of prejudice and even violence against Jews built upon rather than invented by the Nazis. Now, of course, in an attempt to show that Jewish people who lived in these places were not fundamentally different from their neighbors, we wanted to show you some artifacts from their daily lives. Now, some of these are religious artifacts, like you can see, a miniature Torah scroll, actually owned by a child, a prayer shawl, some tefillin. These are religious items, but you can also have secular items, like, for example, a yearbook, like a day planner, and passports. Now, these passports are an interesting transitional artifact because they are normal items of life. Many people today have a passport that they can use for identification and for travel. These particular passports, however, were unique in that they identified the bearer as Jewish, both by carrying a special appended name. There was a law in Germany under the Nazis that went into effect in 1938 that said that you had to have a name that sounded Jewish if you were Jewish. If your name was not on that approved list of Jewish names, you had to add one to your name. So if you were a man and you did not have an approved Jewish name, like this gentleman was Otto Saltzman, not an approved Jewish name, he then had to become Otto Israel Saltzman. And that Israel is handwritten into that passport to designate that he's a Jew. If you were a woman and you did not have an approved name, you had to append Sarah to your name. And you can also see, if you come closely, that there's a big red letter J stamped on the passport, just in case someone didn't get the idea in the first place that the bearer was Jewish. So one of the first elements of the Holocaust is marking and identifying Jewish people to show that they were somehow considered to be different from their neighbors, even though in any practical way they were not. So this is kind of an introduction to telling the story of the Holocaust, to show that Jewish people had full lives that were Jewish, but also were fully integrated into the communities in which they lived. So a German Jew was not just Jewish, but German, and fully German as well as Jewish, or fully Austrian, or fully Czech. And we would make a mistake if we try to talk about the Holocaust in terms of it being the Germans against the Jews, when in reality, the German Jews were Germans. Now, as we move over this way, you enter the historical part of the exhibit to show how the Holocaust really began to happen. Now, many people make the mistake of thinking about the Holocaust only in terms of the genocidal mass murder that took place in the last 3.5 years. But the fact of the matter is that it began with isolation, with propaganda, with scurrilous rumors being spread about the Jews, an attempt by the Nazi movement to turn other Germans and other people against their Jewish neighbors through behaviors and techniques that today we would refer to as propaganda. And we have been able to bring together artifacts that show this, not just in text form, but also in visual form. We've gathered a collection of artifacts and Nazi memorabilia to help to explain how the leaders of the Nazi movement were able to persuade many Germans to accept their view of what would be a positive German future, a future without Jewish people. Now, people who visit this Holocaust Center will notice that many of these artifacts extol the virtues of the Nazi movement, the strength of Hitler as a leader, the strength of Germany as a nation, if it could only be purified of non-Aryan elements. It surprises a lot of people when they look at these artifacts to realize that most of them are not openly and explicitly anti-Semitic. No movement that speaks only negatively of others would be very popular. It also has to have a positive vision of its own members and the future that they hope to embrace. So Nazi Germany was not a place that was only about hating Jews, while in the process not offering any kind of a positive vision. On the other hand, the positive vision that they offered was a lie, and the road to get to a stronger Germany could never have been marked out by the elimination of valuable members of the community. So it was a message that they wanted to seem to be positive, but in the end was really not truthful and harmful. Now, there is one, however, artifact in here that was a book that was published for children. This one is called Trust No Fox, but it was one of a series that young readers were using to, or parents were using to help young readers to fear Jews, hate Jews, and see them as outsiders. And it was mostly visual propaganda, though it did include some pretty ugly stories as well to add to the intensity of the images. Now, we wanted to point this out in the Holocaust Center because one of the main questions that people ask is, why would anyone have followed Hitler and his movement? And most Germans never actually joined the Nazi Party, but most also did support Hitler and his leadership to some degree. So understanding how the propaganda worked and how the agitation worked to try to cast a positive potential Germany of the future, if only Jews could be eliminated, it's important that visitors to the Holocaust Center see that. It's also important, however, that they know that no nation would have simply accepted out of the blue the idea of committing genocidal mass murder. So the first message of the Nazis was not, let's go kill the Jews, but let's remove them from the center of our society. And the beginning acts of the Holocaust were not shootings or gassings. It was things like laws restricting Jewish employment or housing or schooling for Jewish children. Hundreds of laws discriminated against Jews in Germany between 1933 and 1938 before mass violence became the rule of the day. And we think that there's an enormous lesson in this, that an event like the Holocaust would not happen overnight, but rather step by step, a little bit by little bit over time. And if in fact we want to create a society immune to the type of crime that happened in the Holocaust, it needs to be stopped early. Or to put it another way, if people are already being murdered, it's too late. And so we want to make sure that people, when they come and visit the Holocaust Center, learn about the history of what happened in the Nazi era, but in such a way as to be able to apply practical lessons to the world in which we live today. Now, the rest of the Holocaust Center explains the step-by-step process. But essentially, during the period from 1933 to September of 1939, Nazi Germany, not yet at war with the rest of the world, could only go so far in persecuting the Jewish members of society. They could use social isolation and economic discrimination and political disenfranchisement and deprivation of citizenship to make Jewish life so difficult that they hoped that Jews would, on their own, choose to leave Germany and seek to flee somewhere else. The rest of the exhibit, as you proceed further into the room, describes the terrible step-by-step process that the Nazis used to bring destruction and elimination upon the Jewish communities of Europe. One thing that we want people to remember, however, is that each one of those Jewish people had a full, rich, and meaningful life, and that those people deserve to be remembered not mainly as victims, but mainly as human beings. Now we're going to move into another exhibit area where that principle is put into action in the exhibit, Our Story, the Story of Millions. Now what we have in this area is 11 biographical posters documenting the lives of Jewish women who survived the Holocaust and later moved and lived in Central Florida. Here's our survivor, Tess Wise, who was the founder of this Holocaust Center. Right next to her is Helen Greenspun, a good longtime friend of the Holocaust Center, who over the years was our most prolific speaker in schools, telling her story and her family's story to hundreds of thousands of local school students, who, by the way, came to love her dearly. Now, we love her, of course, and Tess, because they've been such good personal friends. Now, what's great about these posters is that they tell full life stories, not Holocaust stories. So each one of these biographical posters begins with childhood and early life, siblings, education, parents, community. Then they move through the story of what happened during the Holocaust period, but they don't end there with the survival of the person. They follow them as they make a new life in America, marrying and having children and grandchildren and careers and homes, because nobody deserves to be seen and remembered only by the worst thing that ever happened to them, but rather by the fullness and richness of their entire life. Now, of course, some of these ladies, sadly, are not with us anymore because we have moved to a period after the Holocaust where if somebody, just for example, say, was 20 years old at the end of the Holocaust, this year they would be having their 93rd birthday. And while some people live into their 90s, many do not. So we have lost some of our friends. But one person I'd like to point out is another survivor who was younger during the Holocaust, from Germany, who was a long-time worker here at the Holocaust Center and still a very good friend, Eva Ritt. And I learned a great deal about the Holocaust from Eva as she told me the story of her family and the community that she lost. But the one thing that I would say is special to me about Eva is that she's a good friend. And I always wonder, why in the time of the Holocaust could not the German neighbors of these people see them as the good friends that they were and not understand that maybe the Nazi method of exclusion or message of exclusion was just wrong? Now, of course, many did. And one of the highlights of visiting the Holocaust Center is encountering the stories of rescue. And there were tens of thousands of people who tried to save and rescue their friends and their neighbors. Sometimes they're known as the righteous among the nations. Sometimes we simply use the term rescuer. Today, a popular term that we use is upstander. But in any case, we put a great deal of stock in telling the story of rescuers because they prove that people did not have to fall for the racist exclusionary message of the Nazis, but could live a life and commit acts of decency and kindness regardless of the danger. And they certainly can be our role models for today. We also want visitors to the Holocaust Center to know that in addition to our permanent exhibits, we also bring in temporarily art and history exhibits from all over the world to help highlight certain stories from the Holocaust period or related events in the history of the world. And the exhibit that we have right now is called Parallel Journeys, and it tells the story of 6 teenagers or young people during the time of the Holocaust who may have had slightly different experiences from one another, but all set against the backdrop of the Holocaust and Nazi-occupied Europe. Now, the Holocaust Center wants to highlight the stories of people who can help to provide us with lessons that we can apply in our own lives today. So this particular exhibit does not only focus on victims, but also a couple of young people who were followers of the Nazis, to help understand why somebody might have been tempted to join that movement, or how they might have been persuaded that the persecution and elimination of Jews or other minorities was not the crime that it actually was. And we want to make sure that people's stories are told in an authentic and an honest way, and this exhibit does a marvelous job at that. It also highlights a non-Jewish person who engaged in rescue, beginning because he had an affection for a young Jewish lady, but he moved from having a personal attachment to becoming a general rescuer who helped about 50 Jewish people to hide and to escape. We know that that these folks can end up being role models for us, and we want to highlight their stories on that basis. Now, the Holocaust Center is open 6 days a week. We have hours from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 9 to 1 on Friday, and 1 to 4 on Sunday. We are located at on the campus of the North Jewish Community Center, 851 North Maitland Avenue in Maitland. And our website is www.holocaustedu.org. And our phone number is 407-628-0555.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her. And her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Esto es amor de verdad, nadie lo puede dudar.
Step up to craft beer. Dino Light Lager has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean-style flavor. Boricua Beer Craft Ale, full-body flavor for the true beer drinker. Stop drinking beer water. Dino Craft Light Lager and Boricua Strong Craft Ale. Feel the rhythm. Step
Hola Florida! Introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light beers. Enjoy responsibly.
Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high quality craft beer, 2 high quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedona.
Hola Florida! Introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light beers. Enjoy responsibly.
Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high quality craft beer, 2 high quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedona.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her, and her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1422.